The studio lights burned hotter than usual. The producers knew it wasn't just the heat, it was the matchup. Denzel Washington, calm and calculated, sat across from Candace Owens, who was already leaning forward, smirking like she'd won before the cameras rolled. The host, a young but already weary moderator named Rachel Vaughn, glanced nervously between them. 3, 2, 1. And they were live. Tonight, Rachel began, two voices from very different perspectives join us to discuss identity, politics, and the future of American values. Let's begin with something simple. What does bravery look like in today's America? Candace smiled tightly and jumped in before Rachel could even nod. Bravery, she said sharply, is standing up against the mob. Saying what needs to be said, even if it makes you the most hated person in the room. People like me, we don't hide behind Hollywood roles or social justice slogans. The shot cut to Denzel, unmoved. We speak truth, she added, while others just perform. The jab was thinly veiled. But Denzel didn't blink. He leaned slightly forward, his voice cool. Is that what you think bravery is? He asked. Volume? Candace tilted her head. No. But I think people confuse calm with courage. Being loud takes guts when everyone wants you quiet. That's the problem, Denzel replied. You think loud equals bold. But noise without purpose is just theater. And too often, that's all we're watching. The temperature shifted in the room. Rachel adjusted her papers. Denzel continued, not angry, precise. I've seen bravery. It doesn't need cameras. It doesn't crave likes. It shows up in quiet moments, when nobody's clapping. Candace rolled her eyes. That's easy for someone adored by Hollywood. And yet, Denzel said, voice firm now, you spend your days performing rebellion while protected by the very systems you criticize. You don't fight power, Candace. You monetize it. The audience backstage gasped. The moderator froze. Denzel turned toward the camera. You're not brave, he said clearly. You're just loud. And the studio went still. Candace's smile didn't disappear, but it hardened. Her eyes flicked toward the control room window, where producers leaned in, their headsets buzzing with frantic chatter. She turned back, lifting her chin. Oh, we're doing that, she asked, voice rising. You want to paint me as a grifter now? Please, Denzel. You play soldiers and lawyers on screen. I've lived on the front lines of culture war. Denzel nodded slowly. Yeah, and it shows. That caught her off guard. He didn't raise his voice, didn't flinch. He just looked at her like he had already read the last page of the script. You've confused shock with strength. Viral clips with real convictions. And somehow, you've made politics into performance art. Candace opened her mouth, but Denzel leaned in slightly. Let me ask you something, Candace. When was the last time you listened, really listened, to someone you disagreed with without already preparing your next takedown? Silence. Rachel cleared her throat, let's try to. No, Candace cut in. Let me answer that. She turned to Denzel, forcing a smile. You think you're some moral compass because you speak softly and wear a suit. But the truth is, your Hollywood lectures don't land outside the coasts. I'm not lecturing, Denzel said. I'm reflecting. Candace scoffed. Reflect all you want, but reflection doesn't change reality. Denzel's tone stayed grounded. But it can change how we see it. And right now, people are seeing through noise. Through fake conflict. Through applause that disappears when the cameras shut off. There was a shift in the room, not dramatic, but present. The live stream chat was exploding. Some furious. Some stunned. Then Rachel, almost whispering, asked, is this what we need more of in politics? Less volume, more presence? Denzel looked straight into the lens. We need less theater, he said. And more truth. The final word didn't echo, but it landed. Even Candace paused. Then, slowly, she sat back. Candace crossed her legs and rested her elbow on the armrest, trying to reclaim her edge. Truth, she repeated with a short laugh. Everybody thinks they've got a monopoly on it. Yours just comes with a soundtrack and slow-motion shots. The audience chuckled nervously. Denzel didn't smile. He simply responded, truth doesn't need a stage. But sometimes, it has to walk into one that's already loud just to be heard. Rachel leaned in now, sensing the tone had shifted from confrontation to confrontation with meaning. You both represent something powerful in American discourse. But the viewers keep asking one thing, who's actually helping the country move forward? Candace jumped in. I am. I've encouraged millions of young Americans, especially Black Americans, to think differently. To break out of a victim mindset. Denzel raised his eyebrow. You mean reject injustice by pretending it doesn't exist? Candace's eyes flared. No, I mean stop using it as an excuse. He leaned forward slightly. And I mean stop using denial as a brand. Boom. The comment hit harder than the volume. Candace's face hardened, but before she could fire back, Denzel continued. You don't need to scream to be dangerous. You just need a camera, a following, and the willingness to say things that cut people off from their own experiences. Rachel looked stunned. The chat exploded again. He's cooking. Candace shaking. This is wild. Candace straightened her back, voice sharper now. I'm not here to coddle feelings. I'm here to speak facts. Denzel looked at her with quiet intensity. Then start by acknowledging all of them. Not just the ones that sell. There was no mic drop, no raised hand, just silence. The audience behind the glass wall was still. Rachel broke it, gently. Let's take a short break. The cameras faded to commercial, but the tension in the studio didn't. Producers huddled. Technicians adjusted volumes. But Denzel and Candace? They stayed locked in, no words exchanged, just the unspoken energy of a conversation that was far from over. The moment cameras cut, Candace leaned toward Denzel, her voice low but tight. You know what your real problem is? He didn't flinch. Enlighten me. You don't like being challenged by someone who doesn't play by your script. Denzel gave a calm nod. No, I just prefer debates where people aren't performing for likes. Before she could retort, a producer signaled, back live in 5, 4, 3. The lights came up again, and Rachel's voice returned to its polished steadiness. We're back with Denzel Washington and Candace Owens, two powerful voices. Let's shift gears for a moment. But no one in the room was ready to shift. Candace spoke first. You want to talk about performance? Hollywood raised you, Denzel. Don't pretend your credibility comes from the streets. Denzel didn't blink. You're right. I've been privileged. I've also sat in courtrooms with grieving families, walked hallways in underfunded schools, and listened, not filmed, just listened. That's where my voice was built. The studio hushed. Rachel, ever the moderator, tried to neutralize. Let's talk solutions. What does real courage in public discourse look like to you? Denzel answered without pause. It looks like showing up with humility. Being willing to admit you don't have all the answers. And refusing to turn every sentence into a weapon. Candace shot back. Humility won't fix crime rates. It won't close the border. America needs backbone. Denzel's voice was even. Backbone without compassion is just rigidity. And volume without substance is just noise. A ripple of reaction swept through the studio. Rachel pressed, so what do we do with this divide between passion and perspective? Denzel glanced at Candace, then back to the camera. We stop mistaking defiance for depth. And we start rewarding those who speak with intention, not just intensity. Candace remained silent. Not defeated, but measured. Watching. The live chat surged. He's not even yelling and he's winning. Candace looks shook. This is the discourse we need. Behind the scenes, the executive producer nodded to a team member. Clip that segment. Front of the YouTube drop. During the next ad break, silence swallowed the set. No rustling papers, no whispered cues. Just the thick, invisible tension between two voices that had stopped pretending to play nice. Candace sipped her water, lips tight. Denzel sat back in his chair, hands folded, still, composed, but eyes locked. A junior producer whispered to the floor manager, "We've never seen her pause this long." The reply came quick. "We've never had him on before." The countdown started again. In 3, 2, 1. Rachel's smile was thinner now. "We're back. Let's talk personal experience. Candace, you've often said victimhood culture is holding communities back. Can you elaborate?" Candace leaned forward. Her tone returned sharp. "I've said, and I'll say again, the biggest threat to progress is this obsession with grievance. People make careers out of pain, platforms out of oppression. It's not strength, it's a scam." The camera panned slightly. Denzel didn't move. "Then, so tell me, Candace," he said slowly, "how do you explain the neighborhood still drowning in underfunded schools, over-policed corners, and systemic job discrimination? Are they all just not trying hard enough?" She countered quickly, "No. But they're being taught that their struggle is permanent, that they need rescuing. That's a lie." Denzel's voice was measured. "Acknowledging pain isn't weakness. It's the beginning of dignity. You can't heal what you won't admit exists." She blinked. He continued, "And when people who've never lived that struggle try to redefine it for applause, that's not brave. That's branding." The crowd behind the glass, tech crew, camera ops, interns, stayed locked in. Every monitor was on. Rachel finally said, "Let's clarify, are you calling Candace disingenuous?" Denzel shook his head. "I'm saying she's loud. And too often, we mistake volume for vision." That line hit like a drum. Candace opened her mouth, paused, then closed it. One of the show's social media producers tapped her phone, trending. #JustLoud, climbing fast. Back in the studio, Rachel exhaled. "Let's take another break." But even the commercials couldn't mute what had just happened. The crew scrambled during the next break. Graphics team already pulling the quote. "You're loud. And too often, we mistake volume for vision." It was everywhere, on TikTok, on X, even showing up as text overlays on Instagram Reels before the final segment even began. Candace adjusted her blazer, her confidence slightly cracked but not broken. Her assistant offstage mouthed something, "Redirect." She nodded slightly. "Back live." Rachel tried to set a softer tone. "We've talked past. Let's talk future. What does unity even look like in a country this divided?" Candace pounced on the pivot. "Unity doesn't mean silence. It doesn't mean catering to feelings. Sometimes truth is uncomfortable. That's the cost of honesty." Denzel leaned forward, calm but unwavering. "Truth without empathy isn't leadership. It's just provocation. You don't heal a wound by shaming the one bleeding." Candace smirked. Here we go with the poetic sermons again. But Denzel didn't blink. "It's not poetry. It's reality for millions. I've been to funerals where the young man in the casket never got a second chance. I've spoken to mothers whose sons were stopped for walking home. Is that discomfort too dramatic?" The studio fell quiet. Rachel was stunned. "Denzel, are you saying Candace is out of touch with the very people she claims to represent?" "No," Denzel said. "I'm saying she's out of sync. Loud doesn't mean connected. Fireworks make noise too, but they disappear fast." The line hung heavy. Candace folded her arms. In the control room, the segment director muttered, "This is gold. Raw, no filter." Meanwhile, in living rooms across the country, reactions split. On conservative forums, the spin had already started, Hollywood elite silencing black conservative. But in the comments of the live stream, another voice grew louder. He didn't silence her. He listened, and spoke back with something deeper. A voiceover teaser dropped as they rolled into the last break. This debate isn't about politics, it's about power, and who gets to define the truth. Candace checked her phone. Even her followers were divided. Some loyal. Others questioning. Denzel? He didn't check his. He simply sat still, waiting for the final round. The final segment began with a wide shot of the studio, two silhouettes locked in a quiet storm. Rachel's voice broke the hush. This is our closing segment. One question to each of you. What does leadership look like in today's America? Candace jumped in first, rehearsed but assertive. Leadership means saying what others are too scared to say. It means standing tall when they want you silent. And yes, it means being loud when the world's too comfortable with lies. She turned slightly toward Denzel. Even if that makes people like him uncomfortable. Denzel didn't flinch. Rachel nodded slowly. Mr. Washington? Denzel sat forward, his voice even, his tone deliberate. Leadership is listening more than talking. It's standing your ground without stepping on others. And it's knowing the difference between being heard and being understood. Candace rolled her eyes slightly. There's that sermon voice again. He kept going. Candace, you're not fearless because you shout. You're fearless when you choose truth over trend. And what I've seen tonight is someone addicted to applause, not answers. The room inhaled. Rachel's pen froze on her cue card. Denzel locked eyes. You call it bravery. I call it branding. Boom. Even the sound team paused their sliders. The moment didn't need sound. It had weight. Candace's expression hardened. You think you've got it all figured out because you've played leaders in movies? He responded without venom. No. But I've studied them. I've met them. And the real ones? They don't yell over people, they lift them. Rachel turned to the camera. This has been, without a doubt, one of the most intense panels we've ever hosted. As she wrapped up, the audience outside the studio glass erupted. Some clapped. Some stood still. But all watched as the cameras cut. Backstage, Candace marched off, her mic still hot. He's just another actor playing humble. Denzel stayed behind, shaking hands with crew. Calm. Steady. On social media, the first montage clip was already viral. Leadership isn't loud. It's lasting. And just like that, the debate didn't end. It started something bigger. By the time Denzel stepped into the hallway, his phone had already blown up. Not with celebrity texts, but from teachers, veterans, single mothers, and strangers across America. One message read, I never thought I'd agree with someone like you. But you made me pause. Thank you. Meanwhile, the network boardroom was in chaos. Ratings had spiked mid-broadcast, numbers not seen in months. The producer looked up from his tablet. We just hit 2.3 million live viewers. Replay projections are double that. Someone else chimed in, the moment's trending under 3 hashtags. Hashtag loud is not leadership, hashtag Denzel unfiltered, and hashtag Owens vs. Washington. Across town, Candace's team huddled. Her press secretary tried to spin the narrative. Let's release a clip of her opening monologue. Make it seem like she set the tone. Candace sat still, unusually quiet. He caught me, she muttered. Not with facts, but with presence. At a cafe in Chicago, a young man showed the replay on his phone to his immigrant father. See, Baba? This is what I mean. He didn't shout. He made people feel something. Elsewhere, on a college campus in North Carolina, a political science professor paused her lecture. "You all saw it," she said. "What Washington did was rhetorical judo. Calm redirected chaos. That's how you move people." Back in the studio hallway, Rachel caught up with Denzel. "That wasn't just a debate," she said. "That was a turning point." He smiled slightly. "I didn't go in to win. I went in to witness." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "And yet somehow, you did both." Candace's driver pulled up to the back entrance. Her assistant opened the door, but she didn't step in. Instead, she turned back to glance toward the building, almost as if part of her knew the conversation wasn't over. Not really. Because out in the real world, that conversation had only begun. And Denzel? He walked toward the parking lot alone. No entourage. No handlers. Just a man who spoke his truth, and watched as the world tried to figure out how it landed so hard without ever shouting. The morning after, headlines lit up every screen. Denzel silences the noise, New York Daily. Owens brought volume, Washington brought vision, Boston Chronicle. No fireworks. Just facts. The Atlantic. Meanwhile, podcast hosts, influencers, and panel analysts scrambled to catch up. Clips of Denzel's takedown were cut, captioned, and reposted at lightning speed. TikTok edits showed Candace's scowl frozen mid-retort, layered under Denzel's quote. "You're not brave. You're just loud." One tweet had over 400K likes by noon. That man didn't raise his voice once, and still owned the entire segment. Masterclass in presence. Back in his modest home office, Denzel stared at his phone. Not out of ego, out of concern. He hadn't meant to spark a movement. He'd simply spoken what too many people whispered at dinner tables and in classrooms. Ruben, his longtime assistant, stepped in with coffee. "You know you just went nuclear on the internet, right?" Denzel didn't laugh. "I didn't ask for viral. I asked for clarity." "But you got both," Ruben said, pulling up his iPad. "PBS is offering a 1-hour sit-down. Colbert wants you. Even Rogan's people reached out." Denzel shook his head. "That's not what matters." Ruben raised a brow. "Then what does?" "The follow-through," he said. "People don't need another clip. They need conversations that last longer than 90 seconds. At that same moment, Candace sat down for a call-in interview on a conservative podcast. Her voice was sharp, but measured. "He's an actor. That's what he does, performance," she said. The host asked, "Did you feel ambushed?" "No," she replied. "I felt underestimated. And that's on me." Later that afternoon, at a town hall in Memphis, a pastor quoted Denzel's line from the show to a packed crowd. "He didn't shout," the pastor said. "He showed." And the congregation nodded, not because they agreed politically, but because they recognized courage when they saw it. By sundown, the narrative had already changed. This wasn't about celebrity versus commentator anymore. It was about voice versus volume. And America was beginning to hear the difference. 3 days later, Denzel Washington stood on the steps of an old library in Newark, surrounded not by cameras, but by community leaders, teachers, and high school students. There was no script. No teleprompter. Just people who had watched him shift a national conversation, and wanted to talk, not clap. A teenage girl raised her hand. "Mr. Washington, how did you stay calm when she came at you like that?" He smiled, then said softly, "Because anger is easy. Listening is harder. And I wanted to model what I wished someone had done for me when I was your age." The crowd nodded, not because it sounded good, but because it felt real. Elsewhere, Candace Owens prepared for her next appearance. Her team was divided, half wanting her to double down, half pushing her to pivot. But Candace, ever defiant, chose neither. I'm not changing who I am, she said into the mirror. But maybe I underestimated what silence could do. At CNN, a producer clipped together a new segment titled, Candace and Denzel, Debate or Defining Moment? The anchor teased it, in a media world of volume and venom, one moment cut through, not by force, but by restraint. Meanwhile, in a barber shop in Atlanta, two old friends argued over who won. I'm with Candace, one said. She spoke her truth. And Denzel spoke ours, the other replied. He didn't try to win. He tried to connect. Back in Newark, after the last handshake, Denzel sat quietly in the library's back room. Ruben handed him a folder. Inside, dozens of printed messages. Most unsigned. Most unexpected. One said, I never agreed with you. Still don't. But you made me want to listen again. That's new. Denzel closed the folder. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just nodded. Because the goal had never been to trend. The goal was to challenge the noise. To ask, what if courage isn't who yells the loudest, but who dares to speak softly when no one expects it? And that question, like Denzel's voice that night, didn't fade. It echoed. Long after the cameras stopped rolling, sometimes the loudest voices say the least. But when one man speaks with clarity, even the noise listens. If that moment hit you, like it did the nation, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We're not here to shout. We're here to say something worth hearing.